Hello, everybody. I am Alessandra Troncone. I work as a curator, and I'm connected from Napoli in Italy. And here with me, like at social distance, there is Oscar Santillán, who is connected from The Hague in the Netherlands. So we decided to organize this conversation to share with you and disclose some topics included in Oscar's solo show titled ANTIMUNDO that was supposed to take place around these dates at the gallery of Livia Benavides in Lima. I will try 80 metros cuadrados. I will try with my terrible Spanish to pronounce it. But yes, so thank you, Livia, for hosting us, even like from a distance. Thank you, Livia, and her team to support this broadcasting. And hopefully we will be able to fly to Peru very soon to make the exhibition. And also, so this meeting will be structured in two main parts, let's say. So in the first part, Oscar and myself are going to talk about a few works included in the show of Lima. While in the second part, we will be talking about the specific research we have been doing together in the past 2 years. About Kipu, and we will tell you later what the Kipu is. And this research was made possible thanks to the kind support of Strom in The Hague, and also the content of this research. The outcome of this research will be the content of a forthcoming publication that we are working together with Oscar. And this publication is kindly supported by ILA, Istituto Latinoamericano in Rome. And I will take this opportunity to also thank Rosa Gijon, the Cultural Secretary of ILA, for her enthusiastic support to our research and activities. And also the outcome of this research will be also part of another show, another solo show by Oscar, curated by myself, who will happen hopefully soon at Tiziana Di Caro Gallery in Napoli. So we have a lot of stuff to share, and this is why we decided to organize this conversation. Before giving the floor to Oscar, who will start, please, I would suggest to use the speaker view. You can turn it on the right, on the top on the right, and please switch off your videos, because we are many, so it's better not to have the video on, and we are all muted because we have to avoid noises, but there will be a Q&A session at the end of the conversation, so you will be free to ask any question later if you're willing to, and please excuse any inconvenience due to, this is the first time for us that we host a conference on Zoom, so please excuse any inconvenience, and enjoy the evening. And Oscar, I'll give you the floor to start.
Well, thanks a lot, Alessandra, and thanks to everyone for being here, and welcome to this conversation. And well, as Alessandra explained, I'm going to begin, or we are going to begin speaking about some works that have been planned to be in the exhibition at Livia, and that are also connected in one way or another to the second part of the conversation, which is going to be the research about quipus that we've been doing for a little while with Alessandra. And so let me begin. So I'm going to share my screen now and show you some images, and while that happens, I will go into explaining what's going on. Okay, view and full screen. Okay, so let me begin here. So this is The first topic that you'll see happening here, or that emerges from the work, is this notion of what astronomy would mean in the Andes, and how it connects through time. I've been making connections between those notions and also contemporary technologies and the history of optics and so on. What we are seeing here is what is called dark constellations. So in the Andes, in addition to the, let's call them like normal systems of constellations that many cultures have had through history, which consists on joining dots in the sky. In addition to that system, in the Andes, there has been this, for very likely over 1,000 years or even more, this other system, which is called, again, dark constellations. What is it? So it is called Mayu in Quechua. And what we are seeing here is the Milky Way, and the cosmic dust in the Milky Way creates certain shapes that they've been that those humans, those cultures in the Andes have been assigning them their own mythology. I will not go into detail, but the animals that you see include a llama, include a snake, and others. Why this notion is so interesting is because so in addition to, of course, like all the value in that relationship that is being told in terms of storytelling and creating meaning out of cosmic behavior. In addition to that, there is this other aspect, which is how contradictory it is that while, let's call them normal constellations, show us light, these constellations are made of shadows. They're actually made of the shadows created by actual dust floating in the Milky Way. And this is how we're going to get to the first word that we'll be speaking about. There's going to be like 5 words that we're going to be discussing with Alessandra. This is the first piece. This is something that began in 2016. And this is a project called Solaris. As you may know, this is of course the title of the film made by Tarkovsky in 1972, released in 1972. But it is also, but that film was based on a novel that was written 10 years prior. So it is in 1961 that Solaris, a novel by a Polish writer, Stanislaw Lem, comes out. And it's incredible, like how through time I've been really encountering so many connections between that novel, that sci-fi novel, and epistemologies in the Andes. Actually, just one little note before I go into describing the work. Just some hints about why is that there is a connection between Solaris, Solaris and certain epistemologies. I'm going to be more precise later on about what type of epistemologies I'm referring to. I just want to remind you the basics of what this novel and the film also go about. This is happening in the future. The novel begins 50 years after humanity has encountered a planet where there is extraterrestrial life. And there have been scientific missions, and there is a satellite that humans have put in orbit around this planet. There are a couple of ways in which the notion of intelligence in Solaris and ecosystems really goes against the Western assumptions. One is that the intelligence in Solaris doesn't come from the typical extraterrestrial, which is, sort of a humanoid shape. But this is actually from the ocean of the planet. So the ocean itself is intelligent. And the second thing is that in the normal storytelling about the relationship between aliens and humans, it happens to be that supposedly aliens are so interested on coming here to talk to us because supposedly we are special. Of course, according to that narrative, aliens are not coming to Earth to talk to to speak to the whales or to beetles, but actually to humans, of all primates us. And the ocean of Solaris is not interested actually on speaking to humans. Okay, so now let me go to the work. And this is the Takama Desert in Chile. And the work, well, I'm going to go into describing what the process for this piece has been. The work consisted on gathering sand from the Atacama Desert and melt it and turn it into glass. And in a bit, I'm going to tell you a bit more about what happens with the glass next. So what we see here is part of the camping, one of those days out. We were traveling for several days throughout the Takama Desert and camping in different locations. Thanks to the help of someone who lives in the Takama Desert, his name is Sael, and we became good friends, and he's someone kindly introduced by curator Alexia Tala. And so Sael, yeah, it was so nice also because he sort of like calmed down all the expectations of trying to make a work of art happen. And what we see here is that at the very end, you see the image on the right shows the detail, and that's the VLT. The Takama Desert in Chile for millennia has been very important for astronomical observations. This is simply due to the fact that being the oldest desert in the world, the driest place on Earth, there is so little to no humidity in the atmosphere, actually creating these sort of fluctuations that get on the way of our observations. So, for instance, the tilting of the stars at night is, as we know, it's just a visual effect created by on Earth by the humidity in the atmosphere. And so the VLT is this fantastic telescope of complex of telescopes on the top of what you see there. This mount in the desert. And the VLT stands for Very Large Telescope. I have to say that my good friends, astronomers, haven't been very creative at naming their telescopes. So this is the Very Large Telescope, and they are building on Takama Desert at the moment what is going to be the largest telescope on Earth, and that's going to be called the ELT, which stands for Extremely Large Telescope. I think we could make some suggestions for names. So what you see here on the left is the process of melting the sand gathered at the desert, and on the right, the process of polishing. So this is the melting of the sand will cause the sand to become glass. And because I decided that we should not purify the sand from the desert, but get it with all the impurities and everything that is part of that ecosystem that I have gathered. So I didn't do the purification of the sand, which is a normal process for this type of way of making glass. And later on, the next step consisted on turning that glass into photographic lenses. And then return to the desert to photograph the desert with this lens made of the desert itself. And due to the impurity in the glass, this is how the images come out. And these very elusive images, all of the sudden, they began resonating for me in terms of the relationship between the novel and what I was experiencing. I was in this place that has been a place for observation, very important for human beings for thousands of years. And all of the sudden, the images that were happening through these lens made of the desert, looking at the desert, were creating these images of this sort of other reality, of this sort of other ecosystem. Sometimes this type of distortions will cause this. So this is at night, and there were this was the moon and Venus were out, and somehow a third blob of light appeared as part of the distortions created by the lens. This is how the work exists. So this is a projection of 24 slides, of analog slides on the left, documenting an entire day, so one image taken per hour of the day. And on the other side of that wall, where the projection is, you see the lens that created the image, or that sequence of images. So that's the case with Solaris. And one of the things that I started noticing was, and this is where I'm going to be a bit more specific about the relationship between this particular case of Stanislaw Lem's novel and indigenous epistemologies in the Andes. And these are two images from two very, very important or really important chroniclers in the Americas from the early decades of the colonization. So this is on the left, Guamán Poma de Ayala, and on the right, Murua, I forgot his name right now. And what they're showing are huacas. So, and this has been a very interesting problem going on. Like, what is it that a huaca means? Because the Spanish colonizers never fully managed to understand what a huaca is, because a huaca can take all types of different forms. So one of the best ways to explain what a huaca is, I'm taking it from Marisol de la Cadena, who is a Peruvian anthropologist, and I have to say here that her way of thinking and understanding all these complexities have been very influential for me and obviously for my practice. So I strongly recommend her work. So the way in which she explains it, what is a huaca? So she says, let's say that let's take a mountain as an example, as a point of departure. So in the Andes, a mountain is three things, or could be three things. One thing is that the mountain is part of the ecosystem. So it's part of the landscape and it's part of the ecosystem. So that's number one. Number two is that mountain can be a sacred place. All right, so notion one and notion two can be fairly easily understand from a Western perspective. But then there is a third layer of it, which surpasses all Western categories, which is the mountain. This mountain has a subjectivity of its own. So that's what a huaca is. A huaca is these three things happening at the same time. Of course, I may be summarizing way too much the beautiful and very clear way in which Marisol de la Cadena explains all these things. She has proposed another name for a waka. Sorry, there is a typing mistake here. It should have said wakas. So it's missing an A after the U. And so she has given it the name, or translate, not giving it the name, sorry. She's translating that name to earth beings. The word translation here is very important. This is a quote from her writings. This is from her book, Earth Beings. And she says, what extractivist and environmentalist practices enact as nature may be also other than such. This is one of the things that we have learned from the mountain in the Andes of Peru, that is also a being. After all, hegemonic opinion is that nature is only nature. To think otherwise, to think that mountains or animals are other than human persons, is cultural belief. And I have to say here something one of the many nuances that she introduces into these discourses is that she has proposed to use the term other than human rather than non-human, which is more commonly used by Latour or Donna Haraway. And I really like that as in terms of introducing a way of seeing notions of the relationship between personhood and ecosystems, not as the negation of not by saying non-human, but explaining that it's just there is an excess in that relationship that surpasses our categories. And just to finish this and continue with the next piece, Marisol de la Cadena says, I translate earth beings as a presence, sorry, my screen is getting on the way here. Yeah. As a presence that blur the known distinction between humans and nature, for they share some features of being with runakuna, meaning people in Quechua. Significantly, earth beings, or what I would call a mountain, a river, a lagoon, are also an important presence for non-runakuna. For example, urbanized, like anthropologists, or rural folks, like a landowner. And this brings me to the next piece, which again connects notions of astronomical observations with notions of the land, of geology. And this is just a quick reminder, because this work is also connected to this notion of, or this idea of dark constellations coming from the Andes. And this work happened, let me just quickly give you the context for this piece. So it is, when I was working for Solaris, I started collaborating with a number of people, but more especially, I would say, I have developed a wonderful friendship with Frans Sneek, who is an astronomer. He's a Dutch astronomer. And we've been working on many of these projects together, along with other people. And Frans invited me to be an artist in residence at the Astronomical Observatory in Leiden in the Netherlands. And that's where I stayed for 1 year. And this is one of the works that came out from that time and from the set of ideas that I'm mentioning. So for this project, the starting point was to reproduce soils from different planets. So the first one that we managed to reproduce is Venus. The image that you see on the left is an image created by or captured by NASA. And this is planet Venus. What you see on the right is another person, and also someone that has become very, very dear to me. And this is Ecuadorian ceramist Freddy Pacheco. And he has become also, so we've been working on this works with him for a while. And let me explain a bit more what's going on. So let me go here. So what you see here are images of different versions of trying to reproduce the geological composition, or rather the chemical composition of the soil of planet Venus. This is based on data facilitated by the astronomers I was working with. And after this whole process, this is one of the, so this piece of ceramic, this piece of pottery that you see here, is made from the soil of planet Venus, so the exact replica of the soil of planet Venus. And this is mounted on an astronomical mount. This is displayed on an astronomical mount, and is programmed so that the whole time it is pursuing or going after planet Venus. So we have this, and this is also very, very interesting that the work is not metaphorical. And this is also one of the things that for me is very important in my work, like trying to reach or to approach things, but by what they are actually, rather than the metaphors. So they are not analogies, but they are presences of themselves. The reason why I'm saying that is because this is not just a replica of the soul of planet Venus, but one can astronomically and scientifically make the claim that this is actually planet Venus. What I mean is that since the solar system was created in one astronomical event, so all the components of the solar system have been spread throughout all the different types of bodies populating the solar system. So the exact material I use on Earth by making a chemical analysis and doing this remix in order to obtain this Venus soil, actually is the same soil that would be found, or the same elements that would be found in Venus, just that on a very different rate or in different proportions. And I also like to think, finally, that this work creates this sort of relationship between our planet and another entity outside of our planet through a material presence, not just by observation.
I would say, Oscar, if I can just like
yes,
quickly step in, that what is very interesting in this work, and I would like really briefly mention another work you're not talking about now, which is Tears telescope, which is like a super briefly, like it's a work which is based on transforming a tear into a lens for observation again. So, I mean, I would like just to remark how eyesight and observation are quite crucial in your work, but also in the way that it's connected to the research. Like, of course, like as a scientist, the first tool of the scientist is observation. But then it also becomes something else in a way that you are creating like special devices in order to observe. So, I mean, there are many things coming together, and of course there is also this presence of the matter, which is very, very, very important. So maybe, I mean, just like not to stop you too much, but I think it would be also interesting at some point also to talk a little bit about your methodology, because I mean, as you can all see, it's very related also to this scientific approach, but then it, of course, as an artist, it becomes something completely different. So maybe, I mean, at some point you can also go a little bit more like into like your approach and methodology to this kind of research and then realization of works.
Yes, and the issue of methodology is a very intriguing one, because I always feel like I'm cheating a bit when I talk about my methodology, because in all honesty, it's so hard to trace down the whole process of how you arrive from point A to point Z. Nevertheless, I will definitely give it a try. I would say that, more than a methodology, I work with a matrix of different sets of interest and strategies. And the works really happen in that matrix in a way that challenges the rational assumptions within that matrix. In that matrix, I find a few elements. I'm going to mention a few of those. So one is indigenous epistemologies. The second one is the history of science in Latin America. Actually, I used to have something here. So this is a small publication that we published in Mexico last year. And I'm writing these little episodes of lost episodes of the history of science in Latin America. And this one was about the first scientific expedition that left from Latin America to another continent. So rather than focusing again on Darwin or Humboldt, I began thinking about trying to find out who were the first scientists that did those travelings the other way around. So again, the history of science in Latin America, by the way, someone wants to read it, is in Spanish, and you can find it in my website. It's there for free, of course. And a couple more things. The other ones is cybernetics. And this is really a kind of lost science in the West that emerged in the 1940s. But all the language that in the arts we use for interdisciplinary research comes from cybernetics. So many terminologies come from this sort of meta science that sort of vanish as a field also, or a sort of like open field, and has permeated into scientific practices and culture, but in a very diffusive way. And well, basically those three, I think they would be things that I work with. And later on, and also emerging technologies, I'm interested in that as well. But then it is somewhere in between. I'm missing one important, which is science fiction for Latin America.
Science fiction.
Yeah. I've been also collecting science fiction for Latin America for the past 2 years. And this has been also, actually, there is a science fiction novel called Constellations Oscuras, or Dark Constellations, which is exactly what I was speaking about before. And there's a novel by Argentinian writer Paula Olaixarac, and it's really a fantastic novel. In any case, Alessandra, I think we will have time for one more work, and then we have to move, right?
Yes, actually, I mean, we are running late, but we knew it could happen. But yes, I mean.
Okay, let me just go very quickly to things and to wrap it up, so we can go to more.
Okay, this is the work I was mentioning.
This is the work that you were mentioning. This is how it works, the process of turning a human tear, or 2 human tears, into a telescope. So this is an image of the moon, seen through, magnified by 2 human tears aligned with a processor for telescopes underneath. So as you well explained before, basically through that process, I managed to use human tears as lenses, and we were speaking about this notion of observation. This is how the work looks. So on one side you see the process, and on the other side you see the image of the moon. And I'm going to skip a few things. And this is how rivers sing. I'm just going to quickly go through the works now. We'll not go much into detail. But How Rivers Sing is a word that takes its name for How Forests Think, the wonderful book by anthropologist Eduardo Kohn. And in this work, I went down through a river in the Amazon, and then I gathered water, little samples of water that I pour into these customized slides that perfectly fit into the analog slide projector. And what you have is this enclosed ecosystem within every one of these slides. So they still contain the water and that microdiversity that gets enclosed there. And basically, as I was going down the river, I started gathering all these little samples. So in a sort of like almost absorbed attempt to have a kind of map of the river, not even a map, but I would say almost a portrait of the river. And this is how the work looks. And there are 80 of these slides in the filling the entire carousel of the slide projector. And this is the type of images that they create. Interesting enough, although slide projectors are still, in this case, you often see things moving inside. And you see also, in some cases, the sedimentation of the river. And this is a very important notion also in the work that you mentioned, Alessandra, which is the relationship between vision and also or the history of optics. And then I'm linking it in very often to ecosystems and how is it that ecosystem as the Solaris, as the ocean of Solaris could actually look see-through thing.
Yes, but actually you are looking like both at the microscopic, like in this case, like it's like very fragments of the landscape, or like to what is like very far away, like planet Venus and so on. But in both cases, it seems like there is this exercise of observe.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also the attempt to find the right device or to create it even in order to observe. And I mean, I was thinking that somehow like this exercise of observation is very related to the science, of course, the technology.
Mm-hmm.
But when the science is not able to give answer, then imagination come into play. So, and I think this is also the strength of your work, that you're like working somehow like on this borderline between something which is like very, I mean, which reveals somehow a scientific approach, but then at some point becomes something like very, I mean, regarding like this idea of imagination and so like fiction and storytelling and so on. But please go ahead, because otherwise we are not
okay.
able to finish in time.
And this is the last piece. So I'm gonna be very, very quick with this. Let me just briefly read this. So this is Manuel de Landa, and this is from the book that I took the title for the piece, and which is 1,000 Years of Nonlinear History. Manuel de Landa is a philosopher of science from Latin America as well. We live in a world populated by structures, a complex mixture of geological, biological, social, and linguistic constructions that are nothing but accumulations of materials shaped and hardened by history. Immersed as we are in this mixture, we cannot help but interact in a variety of ways with the other historical constructions that surround us. And in these interactions, we generate novel combinations, whether of human origin or not, become the raw material of further mixtures. This is how the population of structures inhabiting our planet has acquired its rich variety. So in this work, 1,000 Years of Nonlinear History, I work with two main notions. The first notion is of sedimentation. What about applying this geological term to history? What about working with a material outcome that in itself actually holds that sedimentation? So has all these layers but instead, as in the geological sense, where these layers of sedimentation go one and after the other, as a sort of geological timeline. Actually, here I decided to use a sense of horizontality, and that's the other idea that I've been exploring for this work. What about trying to tell history, not from the Western timeline, but rather from a sense of horizontality. And what we see here, so for this work, I took apart 10 weavings from 10 different centuries, containing the entire, all the centuries between year 1000 and 2000. So this is the oldest one. This is the piece dating from 1000 years ago. And this is the weaving I've been making, which is this, yeah, it's sort of a fish net, sort of an attempt to wrap history, but in this paradoxical way. And this is where you see the integration, the horizontality happening, the sedimentation taking place between all these different times mix and encountering each other in a way that they were never able to, because the historical and social and power structures and also geographical distances didn't allow it before. And this is where I'm going to end. And sorry for taking a bit more than we thought, Alessandra, but I'm just going to jump to the next step if you agree.